Okay, we need to take a look at futures spreads or positions created by spreading futures contracts. One long future contract and one or more short futures contracts. It's very important to note at the outset of this review that spreads in futures are subject to unlimited losses. Let's take a look at some of the future spreads you could be faced with on your exam. Now, the first type of spread is an intra-market spread, meaning in the same commodity in the same market. So here we have someone going long October gold and going short December gold. Here, it's important to note that what you do with the front month or the near-term contract determines whether you are bullish or bearish. Here we are long the October gold contract and short the December gold contract. So we are bullish of gold or bullish on gold in this spread. Now, if we go short March wheat and long September wheat, well, we are short the nearer month and long the deferred or the distant month. Therefore, we are bearish on wheat. What you do with the near-term contract determines whether you are bullish or bearish on the underlying commodity. And here we have an intra-market spread. These are examples of people who have gone long and short contracts on the same commodity on the same exchange, simply different delivery months. Another type of commodity spread that could be established by an investor is an intermarket spread. They could go long the commodity on one exchange and short the commodity on another exchange. Perhaps they feel there is a price discrepancy on one of the exchanges and they want to take advantage of that fact. Here we have someone going long October gold on the CME and short October gold on the COMEX. Perhaps they felt that the October gold contract on the CME was undervalued or underpriced relative to the gold contract on the COMEX. So here they could try and take advantage of that disparity and arb it out, as they say. Perhaps they will converge to a more normal range and they will earn a profit. It's important to note that you could not close out your contract on another exchange by using a contract from the primary exchange. So for example, the person who went long the gold contract on the CME, they could not simply journal over or use that long contract in the CME to offset or close out their short contract on the COMEX. So this is an example of an intermarket spread. It's important to note that you cannot use one long on one exchange to close out a short on another exchange and vice versa. Now, on your exam, you're going to face a number of different types of product spreads. A product spread could be used by a producer of the commodity to hedge their business risk, or it could be used by a speculator to bet for or against the various commodities. You're going to go long one commodity, perhaps the raw or input commodity, and short the refined or output commodity in various scenarios. One of the commodity spread contracts you're likely to see on your exam is the crack spread. The crack spread, it consists of crude and its refined products. Crude oil is the raw input for heating oil and gasoline. When they refine or crack the crude, as they say, they turn crude into heating oil and gasoline. So crude is the input and gasoline and heating oil are the refined products. So someone who is operating as a refiner could hedge both their input and their outputs by establishing a long crack spread. They could buy December crude, they could sell December gasoline, and sell December heating oil against it. So what have they done? They've hedged their input cost, that is the crude oil, and they've hedged their sale price on the refined product, which is the RBOB which is gasoline, and the heating oil. So by establishing a crack spread, the refiner has hedged out all of their business risks, both of their input in the form of crude and their sale price on the refined products, RBOB gasoline and heating oil. The reverse crack spread can be used by someone who feels that perhaps crude oil is expensive relative to the refined products, or the refined products are cheap relative to crude. So here you would sell or go short the crude oil, and you would go long the gasoline and the heating oil in the hopes that these prices for the contracts would converge or go closer to the normal range. Here you have someone establishing a short crack spread where they feel that heating oil and gasoline are cheap relative to the input, and they're effectively hoping that the prices go back to their normal range. Another type of spread that you would be faced with on your exam is known as the crush spread. This consists of soybeans, soybean meal, and soybean oil. Soybean meal and oil are the refined products or the output from soybeans. It's called the crush spread because bean crushers effectively take soybeans and subject them to an enormous amount of pressure, extracting or squeezing or crushing out the oil, and what remains is soybean meal. So bean crushers have an input of the raw or natural soybeans, and they crush them or turn them into meal and oil. So someone who wanted to hedge their input costs when they're operating as a crusher would go long the soybean contract, and they can hedge their output by selling the meal and oil contracts. So here the crusher is hedging both their input or the raw commodity costs in the form of soybeans and hedging the sale price of the refined products by selling the meal and oil contracts. Soybean crushers operate on the gross processing margin. Someone would go long the crush spread if they were speculating that the soybean operators can operate profitably. So a crush spread could be established by the soybean crusher to hedge their business risk. You could go long the crush if you are speculating that the soybean operator will be able to operate profitably on the net processing margin. Now, in order to establish a long crush spread, someone has to sell you the reverse crush spread. With the reverse crush spread, the speculator would sell the soybeans and buy the meal and oil contracts. Here the speculator is betting against the crusher, feeling that they cannot operate profitably. Or perhaps they just feel that soybeans are expensive relative to the meal and oil, its refined contracts. Now the difference between the price of the raw commodity soybeans and the price of the meal and oil is the net processing margin. That spread is the net processing margin. The net processing margin does not include any of the overhead that the crusher may have to incur to process the soybeans into soybean meal and oil. So be aware of the crush spread and the reverse crush spread, when it's used, why it's used. Be aware that the crusher is operating on the net processing margin, which is the difference between the raw commodity and the sale price of the refined products, which is that soybean meal and soybean oil. Now, a cattle grower is someone who buys young, skinny cattle and raises them on the ranch by feeding them and turning them into adult cattle ready to go to market. And the cattle that are ready to go to market are known as live cattle. So a cattle rancher may want to hedge their business risks by putting on a cattle spread. They would go long the feeder cattle because that is their input. They must buy the feeder cattle to raise them and grow them into live cattle. Then once the cattle have matured and they're ready to go to market, the rancher sells live cattle. So the raw or input cost for a cattle rancher is the feeder cattle, and the output or refined product, as it were, is the live cattle. So you'd want to go long the feeder cattle and short the live cattle contract if you were operating as a cattle grower. Now, those are likely the spreads that you'll see as far as it goes with the commodities, whether it be the crack spread or the crush spread or perhaps a cattle spread. You want to be comfortable with them. Be aware of who would put them on, why they would put them on. Most likely you're only going to have to identify what they are, not do a kind of a P&L calculation. So now that we've covered some of the agricultural and commodity products in commodity spreads, we want to move on here to spreads in financial futures. And we're going to specifically look at some spreads in treasuries. We can put on an intra-maturity spread by using T-bill contracts and T-bond contracts. Now, an intra-maturity spread, we use a T-bill contract which covers $1 million of par value and a T-bond contract which covers $100,000 of par. You can see that the T-bill contract covers 10 times the dollars that the bond contract covers, so it's going to be a dollar-weighted spread on a 1-for-10 basis. So every bill contract you buy, you're going to want to short 10 bonds, or for every 10 bonds you short, you're going to want to buy 1 T-bill contract. Now, if the investor believes rates will fall, they will buy the T-bond contract and they will sell the bill contract on a 1-for-10 basis or a 10-for-1 basis. They would buy 10 bond contracts, total par value $1 million, and they would sell 1 bill contract, par value $1 million. If rates fell, the value of the T-bonds would increase substantially, while the value of the bills would not move tremendously at all. It would move very, very little. Now, if rates are going up, you feel that the bond prices are going to go down, you would want to sell bonds and you would want to buy bills. So perhaps you'd want to sell 20 Treasury bond contracts and buy 2 T-bill contracts. So with the intra-maturity spread, it's a dollar-weighted spread, and it would be established on a 1-for-10 basis. Now, if we're going to do a maturity-weighted spread, our previous example was a dollar-weighted spread. Here's an intra-maturity spread that is going to be established once again using treasuries. T-bills are $1 million par value, and T-bonds are $100,000 bonds. So what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to do this on a 4-to-1 basis. So for every 2 T-bill contracts you establish, you would want to establish an offsetting position in 500,000 par value of the Treasury bond contracts. So if rates are going down, once again, we're going to buy bonds and sell bills. And if rates are going up, we're going to want to sell bonds and buy bills. So this is a maturity-weighted spread. And the reason we do this on a 4-to-1 basis is because the bills cover a 90-day T-bill, and there are 4 90-day periods in a year. And these are quoted on an annualized interest rate basis. And the T-bonds have that annualized rate of interest already attached to them. So for every 2 bills, you need to put up $500,000 in par of bonds. So it's $4 to every $1. And that's a maturity-weighted spread using the T-bond and T-bill contract. More important that you understand which contract you would buy or sell. when you're using T-bills versus T-bonds. And now we're going to take a look at another type of spread known as the TED spread. The TED spread gets its name from the fact that it includes Treasury bills and Eurodollar deposits. What are Eurodollars? Well, Eurodollars are U.S. denominated dollars held in an overseas account. Why would someone put American dollars in a bank or on deposit offshore? Well, they would be able to obtain a slightly higher interest rate than they would be able to obtain here domestically. So a Eurodollar is a dollar-denominated account held outside of our country, actually outside our country in any country. It does not matter where it is held. Let me see if I can help you understand this concept. Perhaps many of you have gone overseas, and when you landed in the foreign country, you reached into your pocket, your wallet, your purse, and you pulled out a few hundred American dollars. Well, when you were in another country, those dollars that you pulled out were in fact Eurodollars. So any U.S. dollars held abroad in an account are known as Eurodollars. Now, the TED spread can be used to speculate. It could also be used to hedge. T-bills are considered AAA rated. They are absolutely best quality out there. And when you have the best quality credit in the marketplace, the interest rate attached to those products is low because the risk is low. Eurodollar deposits are considered to be AA rated credit, so slightly less than the T-bills. So when we have a belief about rates or credit conditions, we can hedge or speculate by using the TED spread. If you feel that interest rates are going down, we're going to want to buy Eurodollars and sell Treasury bills. So if rates are down, we're going to buy Eurodollar deposits and we're going to sell Treasury bill contracts. If rates are going down, this is the position we would want to take, because as rates go down, the price of the Eurodollar future would trade higher by more than the increase in the corresponding short Treasury bill contract. Let me say that again. If rates went down, the price of the Eurodollar contract would increase more than the Treasury bill contract. Now, if we thought rates were increasing, we would want to sell Eurodollars and buy Treasury bills. If rates are going to increase, the value of the Eurodollar future contract would fall by more than the Treasury bill contract, thereby creating a profit for the speculator. Now, there are several other scenarios that could be used with the TED spread to speculate or hedge. The TED spread could be used to speculate or hedge against a change in credit conditions or in credit quality. If we were concerned that credit was going to deteriorate, we would want to sell the Eurodollar future and we would want to buy the T-bill future. As credit quality deteriorated, the value of the Eurodollar would fall more than the value of the bill, thereby creating a profit for a speculator or an appropriate hedge for someone who is looking to hedge against a deterioration in credit quality. Now, if we thought that, well, we've just come through a bit of a rough patch as far as the economy goes and credit conditions are going to improve, we would in that case want to go long the Eurodollar and short the T-bill future. If credit conditions improved, the slightly worse credit futures contract would trade higher by more than the AAA rated contract. So credit improving, we're buying the Eurodollar and we're selling the futures. If credit conditions did indeed improve, the speculator would make a nice profit on that TED spread. Now, margin requirements for future spreads are lower than the speculative margin requirement for an outright position. So if we were going to spread a long gold contract versus a short gold contract, we'd be required to put up a lower margin requirement than we would if we just bought or sold one gold contract by itself. That is because one contract is hedging the other, and the risk of loss is lower than an outright purchase or sale. So spread margin is lower than speculative margin. Now, it's important to note that when one contract becomes the front month, that is the contract that is the next for the delivery period, the CME requires the full speculative margin for that front month contract. Let me say that again. When one contract in the spread becomes the front month, that is the futures contract with the nearest delivery period, the CME requires the full speculative margin for that leg of the contract. Okay, I think we've done a great job here going through the various types of commodity and product spreads you're likely to see on your exam. Please refer to your book for additional clarification and examples, and we'll see you in the next section.